Welcome back once again. In today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the projects I've been working on for the past few weeks. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go. So I've been spending a lot more time down at my workbench, and I found that I have somewhat of a need for a readily accessible sharp object, kind of like a pocket knife, if you will. The one that I have, it's a Benchmade. It's called the Griptilian. I don't know who came up with that name, but that's what it's called. And it had a belt clip on it. The problem I was having is that every time I'd wear it on my belt, I'd find that I'd look down and it would be half open and sticking me in the guts. And since I'm not trying to remove a kidney, I thought, why not make a leather sheath for it that I could just carry it around in my belt, take it on and off as I needed. It's been a little while since I did any leather crafting, so I thought that it would be a nice little refresher to throw together a piece like this just with whatever scraps I had laying around. I found some nice Wicked and Craig that I had. I always like to keep these small pieces just, partially because I'm a bit of a material hoarder and partially because I always end up finding a use for them. In this case, I had some pretty high quality leftover material. Wicked and Craig's harness leather is probably my favorite to work with out of any tannery of leather that I have tried, and I've tried quite a few. I find that all the colors are quite nice and it's just really forgiving to work with. It has more of an oily, kind of waxy sheen to it than their English bridle leather, which is what I typically use when I recover things like cameras. The other benefit is I find that this stuff tends to be a little bit harder wearing than some of the other leathers that I've worked with. My wallet is actually made out of this, and it's really good for everyday use type stuff. Like, it'll take scuffs, scratches, gouges really well, and anything that doesn't kind of just blend in over time gives it a really nice looking patina. I always find it really satisfying whenever I'm able to use leftover scrap materials to work on projects. I find that a lot of the time the process is just a lot more enjoyable because I'm not worried about wasting or ruining materials that I've purchased specifically for a project, especially things like leather and some higher end type materials that tend to cost quite a bit. Typically, I purchase leather around the 2-ounce mark. For me, it's mostly because I tend to work on smaller scale projects. I don't do a lot of larger things like bags and stuff of that nature. Because I only had the lighter weight leather to work with, I had to back this with some chrome tan cheap stuff that I picked up at a random fabric sale. I wasn't really sure if this stuff was even actually leather. I've used it for another project and it came out pretty well, but I'm just not a fan of working with chrome tan leather. One of the benefits of it is that it is quite a bit cheaper than vegetable tanned leather. For those of you who are unfamiliar, chrome tan just refers to the process by which the leather is tanned, and chrome tan is tanned using chromium, which is a much faster process. It usually only takes about a day, I think, whereas vegetable tanned leather takes significantly longer, but the quality tends to be better. Whenever I throw together a small project like this on a whim, I rarely make a pattern because I know that my first attempt is going to have at least a few flaws, and to be honest with you, with my work, it's probably going to be more than just a few. Usually I prefer not to waste time trying to get things perfect on the first go around when I don't even know if things are going to work. I find that the main issues will present themselves as you go, and then it's a lot easier to address them efficiently on the second go around. In this case, things worked out pretty well from the start, and it was just a matter of having some issues with the fitment, which was a little bit loose. I probably could have taken off at least 1/8 of an inch, maybe even 1/4 of an inch, to snug things up a little bit. As the leather sheath was used more, it started to loosen up around the knife. But I'm not really too concerned about it. As a prototype, it is what it is. The other thing that I would definitely change is I would take off the top corners near where the belt loop goes. I find that they're sticking me kind of in the side where the sheath sits, but it's still a significant improvement from being stabbed with the end of a knife blade. I had a few gifts ungiven from the holiday season that I wanted to catch up on because, it's now March. A few years ago, I made this belt for my mom using this old armadillo belt buckle that she had. And ever since then, my dad's been like, why doesn't anyone ever make me a belt? So I finally did. For this project, I ended up ordering a 10-ounce strap blank, which is really the only way that you can get belt blanks if you want to make a belt, unless you order a full side of leather, which you'd have to order a really heavy weight, like an 8 to 10 ounce. Some people even like to go up to like 12 ounce, which is a really, really thick piece. And then you're kind of stuck with that. So unless you're just making a lot of belts and you have a strap cutter that you can just crank out belts, it's kind of tough if you're making a one-off. And for that reason, I kind of think that as far as leather work goes, they seem like that they'd be a good and approachable first project for somebody who is new to leather crafting. But I actually feel like it's kind of a trap because the belt blanks are pretty expensive. Like I spent somewhere in the $20 to $25 range for the one that I bought, and to spend that much and then spend the time to make it, like you're doing it for the enjoyment of the craft. Unless of course, you know, you're making money from your work. But yeah, it's kind of a lot. I mean, especially when you're new and you really the best thing is just to be doing reps of whatever it is that you're creating to just improve. So you need a lot of material and you don't really want to spend a lot on it because you want to be free to make mistakes, like I mentioned earlier with, you know, just using scrap. Even for me, I mean, I've been at this for a few years now. I'm still relatively inexperienced at leather crafting, but you know, this is only the third belt that I've made, and the first one was sort of a failure because I cut it to the wrong length. I definitely made a fair few mistakes while I was making this. It is certainly not my best work. You might have noticed initially I didn't add enough extra length on the loop around to add my maker's mark. And so I ended up having to apply over the back in order to add that, which, you know, some people would probably have just left it off. But in my opinion, I think it's important to add a maker's mark to your work because it's kind of like your signature on, you know, on a painting or a drawing or something. I think it's good because it makes it's like, it adds conviction to the work that you make. Even if it's not great, it's like, okay, I made this and I'm putting it out there, and now you can look back a few months, years, whatever it is, and you can see your improvement. And a lot of the time I've found that the improvement is pretty significant. So I always like to add a maker's mark or something to my work. I think it's a good practice to be in. In this case, I was trying out a new technique that I hadn't done before, which is where you take beeswax and you wax the edges with beeswax, and then you take a heat source like a blow dryer or a heat gun, and you melt the wax into the edge before you burnish. Usually I use this product that's called Tokonol, which is, you know, it looks like glue, smells like glue, feels like glue, but it's not glue. And it ends up, it's kind of like a sealant. It seals up the fibers on the edge, and it provides you with this sheen that you can build up by adding multiple layers. It looks pretty good most of the time. Sometimes it can look a little bit dull depending on the color leather that you're working on. So I wanted to try something new, and it kind of failed. It has this more like rustic, rugged look to it. I just couldn't get the color even. And then in the process of trying to get the beeswax on the edge evenly, I also ended up getting wax on the top grain of the leather, which was a fucking pain in the ass to try and blend in. The blow dryer that I used, I was able to kind of pull the wax out of the surface and blend it, but it was not perfect. I'm thinking I might give the method another try on a smaller piece, but I don't know. Until then, not so big on the beeswax edge finish. Next thing I wanted to do was work on a couple camera straps for a few of my friends. One of my friends, I just got done working on his Minolta XG1, which I actually had told him that I would do a repair on for his birthday, which was last May, and of 2022. So I wanted to give him a little something extra to go with it as a thank you for being patient. A year or two ago, I was seeing a lot of people on the trend of using climbing rope for camera straps. Like, a lot of people seem to like that look, and I thought it was cool too, but the problem I had was that I felt as though a lot of the camera straps seemed sort of like not very confidence inspiring. The way that the end of the rope was attached to the swivel snap or like split ring or something, they didn't seem very secure to me, and I had read of a few people having issues with them, so I decided that I would try my hand at making a strap out of paracord because it's a very rugged and durable material. So I set off to find a way to do that, and I stumbled across the snake knot, which is essentially just like a repeated weave. I'm gonna link a video in my description to a channel called Weavers of Eternity Paracord. There's a video on that channel that is essentially just like a tutorial for how to make one of these. They do a much better job explaining the knot tying than I ever could. So go check that out if you're interested in making one of these yourself. For the second one I made, I used an alternative method in which I took a 4-strand core and I coiled the paracord around it all the way down the length. And I also really like the way this one looks too. I also find that this method yields a more comfortable camera strap than the snake knot because the coiled paracord kind of cushions your neck and your shoulder for extended shooting. If you're out, you know, on a photo walk or whatever, or for an entire day, I find that the coiled method is more comfortable. Personally, I use 2 of these camera straps, one of each kind, of 2 different lengths, and I've been using them for at least a year and a half, better part of 2 years, and they have been really, really good. The nice thing about having the staggered setup is it allows you to carry 2 cameras, and because they're of different lengths, when you swing one around your side or whatever, if it's on your shoulder, you end up not slamming your cameras into each other while you're out shooting. So that's a nice little benefit of having the 2 separate lengths. After making the first one of the snake knot style camera straps, I thought that it would be cool to make one into a dog leash, which you know, may not be an exciting idea to some of you, but you know, if you like dogs, cool. My close friend just adopted a Belgian Malinois puppy in August, and so since he's less than a year old and he's still kind of in a training phase, I thought that it would be a nice gift to give him a leash for his dog. So the main idea behind this Paracord dog leash is that you have 3 D-rings along the length of the leash, and both ends of your leash have lever snaps so that you could hook your end. One of them goes on the collar of the dog, and then the other one makes for an adjustable leash. So if you want to have maximum length, you just put it on the first D-ring, and you know, if you're in a quieter area, or if your dog is very well trained, you can do that. You give them a longer leash. If you have more of a dog that Redditors would hate, then you put it on the minimum D-ring, or even hook it on to both ends to your dog's collar, and you'd shorten the leash fully. I made this leash 6 feet in length, so if you were to do that, it would be a 3-foot leash. So it allows you more leverage when you have a dog that you're trying to train, or a very large dog. Even though the 550 cord's really strong, and I stress tested it with the camera strap, which, you know, camera's not that much weight. It's not under that much stress unless you're carrying like a fucking RB2 RB67s or whatever. I don't even know what's the heaviest camera. The Fuji GFX. No, it's not the GFX. I don't know. There's one that's like a studio camera that's just enormous. But yeah, unless you have one of those, you're not carrying that much weight. A dog, on the other hand, it's like sometimes they go into 4-wheel drive and you'll yank your ass. So I really wanted to make sure that the weak points around the D-rings were reinforced, because, you know, I'm paranoid. I'm kind of a paranoid guy. I imagine his dog breaking off the leash and diving under a car or some shit. So I don't want that to happen. So I took more leather and I went around it and I did a box stitch. It's like a saddle stitch, box stitch, to reinforce it. And it's pretty fucking strong. I mean, this dog's got to be pretty juiced to be able to break this leash, but you know, hopefully not. And the hardware I used on it too, I used solid iron powder coated lever snaps on this thing, so it should hold. I mean, overall, I think it's kind of a cool idea. They take this thing, it took forever to make. It was, you know, I thought the camera strap took me a long time to make. This thing, we're talking at least 4 hours of weaving this shit, and my god. I am not one for tedious, repetitive tasks. Some people love that. I'm not that guy. but I do think it came out pretty good. I think the stitching, like those box stitch, the leather loop D-ring covers could have looked nicer, but it's all black. It kind of blends in well enough, and I'm overall pretty happy with the way it turned out. Back in January, I went on a photo walk with a group of friends. They're into abandoned spaces and stuff. It's not really my thing as far as subject matter goes, but I'm not one to turn down shooting photos, so of course I went. The camera that I was shooting with on that day was the Minolta HTSI Plus with the 35 to 105 f 3.5 to 4.5. My X700, which I know in my last video I was kind of talking up as like my go-to camera. It was well, it was being used for that video, so it was needed, and I didn't really feel like reattaching the strap lugs and whatever else to get it out for that day. I was down in Florida about a year ago visiting my brother, and on a whim I randomly decided to bring this HTSI Plus with me. I had just gotten it in a random lot of camera gear that I bought online, and I was like, you know what the hell, let's give this thing a go. I was shooting expired film on the camera, and I was really impressed with the results when I went to develop it. So I wanted to give the camera some more mileage. It was cold out, it was gray, and I didn't really have the right film, but I worked with what I had, which was Fuji Superia 400, and I pushed it to 800. I was shooting at 800 to get usable handheld speeds, and also hoping to get a little bit more contrast, a little bit more saturation out of the image, which didn't really work, to be honest. Normally I prefer black and white film for these types of shooting situations because I just feel like black and white film works a lot better on gray flat days, northeast winter basically. Unfortunately, didn't have any higher speed black and white film on this particular day. All I have is a stockpile of Superia 400, and I also had some Rolei Retro 80S, which is actually my favorite black and white film currently. Had there been enough light, I think Retro 80S would have been a very good choice because it is an inherently high contrast film, and for that reason it's more of an advanced film to shoot. It is not a forgiving stock. A lot of people say use a tripod, you know, on darker days where you don't have higher speed film, and I agree with that, but at the same time, when you're out with a group of people shooting, you're on a photo walk, it's like it's a real pain in the ass to pull out a tripod, and then you don't want to slow everyone down, so it's just annoying. More than just two people, I think tripod is kind of off the table for me. I don't know, that's my take. Maybe it's bad, but that's what I prefer. None of the photos I took on that photo walk in January were very good at all. I was kind of out of practice. I find that shooting photos is kind of like riding a bike. It's like you don't forget how to do it, but you really need to like warm up your eye. As I mentioned earlier, the wintertime I don't do a lot of shooting because it's cold, and I've gotten soft since I've moved back to Connecticut from Vermont. This photo in particular is a really good example of the bokeh that this lens produces. It has this kind of characterful swirling effect when it's shot fully wide open. I mean, it's not the sharpest wide open, but who cares really? If you wanted the sharpest possible photos, then, you know, why shoot 35mm or film in general for that matter? Aside from that, pretty much all of the other shots would have just turned out better in black and white, and that's what I did. I just changed them over to black and white. I don't have a problem doing that. Some people are purists for whatever reason with their post-process when it comes to film, but if I have the tools to change an image from color to black and white, I'll do it if it makes the image better. Same goes for cropping and editing in general. I'm pretty light when it comes to editing, but I'm not afraid to crop in pretty drastically even on a 35mm image. There are a couple other just random photos on this roll that I must have taken at one point or another prior to shooting the rest of it on this photo walk. Once again, there was really nothing worthwhile except for this one picture of my dog, which I do like because, well, it's my dog. but I do also think that the lens rendered the image quite nicely. Quick note, all of these photos were developed with 3-month expired Cinestill CS41 chemistry, and they were scanned on an Epson V330. So if you were wondering, there you go. There was one other project that I worked on. It was a leather key fob cover, because I was crawling around a junk shop and I found a little basket full of old letterpress stamps, or at least I think they were letterpress stamps. And I like this kind of stuff, so if it's cheap, I get it when I can. In this basket, I happened to find an old Ford logo stamp, and I have a very, very distant future project that I plan on using it for, so I bought it. But I was itching to try it out. So I wanted to make a key fob cover for my dad's car keys, because he drives a Ford truck. But yeah, it didn't work out. So I was trying to wet mold, which is a process that I haven't tried before, and it just, the design failed. And I tried to do it again for this video so I could get a finalized product to show you, but once again I was not able to get a result that was passable, in my opinion. Maybe I'll circle back to it at some point, but until then, we're gonna let that one rest. During all of this, all these various projects, I got a package in the mail. What is in this package? Well, I'm going to show you. It is a lot of camera gear, and these are X700 bodies and lenses. Actually, no, there's an there's an SRT 101, which I actually didn't have one of these, which is kind of cool, but I'm not a collector anyway, so I don't really care. Nice little throw in. But yeah, anyway, I bought these for what is going to be my next video. So, I bet you can probably guess what that's gonna be. Maybe not. Anyway, thank you for being here, and thank you for making it to the end of this video. As always, if you liked the video, like it, share it with your friends. If you hated it, share it with your worst enemy so they can suffer through it. Subscribe if you're interested in this kind of content. If you have something that you want to see, write it in the comments. Until then, I will see you guys next time. Peace.